The main topics we're going to be talking about tonight is regarding COVID and a return to poolside, and nerves regarding that, and experiences of officials that have already returned back to poolside since lockdown. There'll be some updates on the East Region galas we have planned for later this year, some updates regarding officials and officiating, some open meet licensing criteria, which will be effective until the 31st of December this year. Then we will return back to the previous open meet licensing criteria. The Swim England return to competition guidance. And we've already, when I sent out the email advertising the actual forum, I sent a link to where you could look at the FINA stroke videos. If you have any particular questions on videos or on the matters arising from that, then obviously there's an opportunity at a later stage. And then the question and answer session at the end and through the chat box admin. I think some people still got their microphones on. I'll ask you if you can mute them, please. So, Tom, is this where you wish to carry on, or do you want me to carry on from this point? You've been muted, Tom. So thank you.
First mistake of the night. Thank you for that. I will, before I start talking about this particular session, what I would say is what a turnout and testament to Dave's work over a number of years within the region, that we have so many people on a call about returning to officiating. It's very, very encouraging. In one of my roles, I do find myself having to deal with low turnouts for officials in other areas of the country. I think it's quite remarkable that we've got over 250 people signed up tonight. So welcome everybody. It's great to see you. Dave, can I just ask you to click a couple of times on there to bring the picture up?
Yep. Sorry, every time someone comes in, it stops me clicking. Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you. So
there we are.
Thank you. And one more time. Thank you. So what we've got here is a picture of an event from Australia. And obviously swimming, massive sport out there, and every school every year runs a swimming carnival. They don't call them galas, they call them carnivals. And I think we can learn quite a bit of that in terms of the times that we're facing and the return to pool that we're preparing from. Granted, it's unlikely that there'll be a barbecue for public to have at events. Unlikely that there will be a load of supporters, but the principles and the core principles there are really useful. We're going to need, and we want our sport to return in a way where people bring a good attitude, and that includes us and officials and the swimmers as well. I have to say, one of the constants that I've had in the galas that I've attended has been the enjoyment that people have gained from them. And so that's something to keep in mind when we do it. We also think about different ways of learning these things as well, and how these events in Australia run. First of all, they're open air. We're going to have to think of different ways of running our competitions, both as officials and as promoters, to enable the competition to return. And so that idea of maybe using outside space like they are is also key. And we're going to come to how we've acted upon that within the region very soon. And the focus absolutely has to be on enjoyment. Some of these swimmers have been training in and out of lockdown for over a year with very, very limited competitive experience. That will have an impact on their ability to perform. It will also have an impact on their enjoyment of the sport. And that's essentially what we're looking to return. So Dave, if you could move on, please. So actually, whilst the sport is returning, there is quite a role to be played by those people like us that wear white and return to the sport. What I can assure you, if you are feeling particularly nervous about returning to the pool, when you return to the pool, it will look different. And we're going to discuss how our experiences over the last few months have confirmed to us that the pool is different. But some of the headlines are, you may well find that competitions need to be organised and structured in a slightly different way. It may be that people will limit the number of people on poolside by limiting the number of age groups that are in a session, rather than putting everybody together. That could be one change. You will find that there will be at the start a nervousness amongst all people, such that people might tend to perhaps overplan for a COVID situation. And I can certainly say that when I went off to even going to the British swimming Olympic selection meet, yeah, I packed my house to go there. It was the first time I packed away for about a year. And what I didn't take was was much less than what I did take. But things like that will have to be taken into consideration. So if you are nervous about returning to poolside, what I can say is almost certainly, irrespective of what happens on the 21st of June, where we are supposedly having this release date back into normality, some doubt over that now, swimming will still look different. And the worries that you may have about officiating in an overcrowded space, there being lots of people around, actually will change. There won't be a huge amount there. We do need you as well, is that very often, I don't know if you become aware, I certainly have become aware over the time that I've been in lockdown, is that lots of people comment about things on Twitter and Facebook, and they have a view about things. And every time we release a statement from Swim England, or we release a statement from East Region, there is often a lot of comment about it, and often it's really positive, very grateful, but there's always a core of really people that want to challenge you on your decisions, which is fine in many ways. But actually understanding the rationale for why we're making these decisions is really important. And we'd love you to be out in your respective galas, be that Level X or any of the regional meets that are being held, and actually explaining the rationale for why we are doing some of the things that we are doing. You know, the sport is, hugely different now. The sport has changed completely over time. We've had no sport for a long, long time. There's been no competition. The first time since World War II that we've not been able to run national competitions, or indeed any competitions. There has been a massive impact on the sport. And so volunteers, perhaps now that Swim England has lost so many staff due to the financial constraints of the pandemic, volunteers play an even more essential role in the resurrection of the sport. And that's why we come down to doing things differently. We've talked about organising the pool differently. We've talked about running an event differently, but actually our whole approach to swimming has had to change. I think had Level X been introduced, and I am guilty of being one of the creators of that, had Level X been introduced at any time other than now, I probably would have quite strongly opposed it. The reduction in the number of officials, all of the requirements, the inputting of manual times onto rankings, and then a generation of a leaderboard. I would have been opposed to that up until March 2020. Now it's absolutely essential that we provide it, and it provides an opportunity for swimmers to return to some form of competitive action. And if you haven't had the chance to participate in a Level X yet, which again, many swimmers haven't, it's a really good opportunity in an informal way to go back to a very, very low level of competition. And so it's really important that it exists to give everybody the chance to return to some form of competitive action, albeit slightly removed from the standard process of officiating that we're used to. This is also a really useful time to stand back and reflect about local customs. And there are times where we might respect local customs and other times where we might to avoid local customs. And it's really important that we stress that this evening. There's no point, and our experiences of dealing in writing the return to competition document, in writing and being at galas, there is no point at this moment in time in comparing like for like. A gala that happens at Norwich may well be very different to a gala that happens at Basildon, may well be very different to a gala that happens in Hertfordshire. And that's because there are local customs that we need to abide by. Centres will all have slightly different ways of allowing their poolside to operate. There will be slightly different things. And just because one place insisted on the wearing of masks and others made it optional, it doesn't mean that either are wrong. So when the matter is concerning a safety element, you will find that your experiences when you talk to the officials community will be different. And we're going to highlight how different those experiences have been by our own experiences today. We also need to consider the fact that sometimes local customs are well avoided. And I'll share with you one thing that I had to step in and do, not in this region, but elsewhere, when I discovered that one county had decided to create an approved list of officials for those that were able to attend Level X meets. So we've got a sense that we've been trying to create Level X to create an unblocking remove a barrier to competition. And straight away, we had an organisation go in and prevent an organisation from running because they wanted to ensure that only the right officials could be doing that. That's not this region. It never would be this region because we know how our counties operate. But there's an example of perhaps a well-meaning intention doing the same. We've also had an email from other colleagues suggesting that they could visit all the Level X meets in their area to ratify that the officials were acting properly. Now that shows a misunderstanding both of COVID bubbles, but also of a profound lack of trust in that particular area about the people that do operate galas. And so there is something to consider in that regard, that sometimes imposing a local custom, signing off a result. There was another county that insisted that all results were sent to them first so that they could sign off the results as being accurate before they were submitted to Swim England. It didn't last very long, but that's one of the things. Level X at that level, and indeed any competition that we're running at present, is simply designed to return the sport. And sometimes that involves maybe a small reduction in standards, particularly with Level X, to enable other things to happen. So yeah, 2 examples there of how local customs can be an enormous help and sometimes an enormous hindrance. So yes, thank you, Dave. So we're going to take some turns now and talk about the different experiences that we've had and indeed haven't had as part of our return to competition. So to start off with, various of us have various connections with each of these events that are displayed to you now. British Swimming's run 2 events. It's had the British Para Swimming International and the Olympic selection meet that was at London Aquatic Centre. Craig has been at the European Championships that just held in Hungary. Spectacular event, televisually in one of the best swimming facilities in the world, in the Duna Arena in Hungary. We've also got a very low level Level X racing, which I will talk about. We've had the European Open Championships for World Para Swimming. And also, I'm going to end on the one that's in the top left-hand corner, which is the event I was ostensibly attending, which has been cancelled. And cancellation, the World University Summer Games, or postponed if you like, is going to be still a very current language in swimming. It will be something that happens on a fairly regular basis for the time being. We've already seen the changes that are proposed to the 21st of June. There's hints that it will be delayed. And one of the casualties of that has been my event, and it will be the case that it may well be the case that events do get cancelled as a result of the pandemic. Now, I've spoken for quite some time now, so I'm going to hand over to my colleagues who will talk about their particular experiences in the events. And Dave, if you could move the slide on, there's then 4 different headings as a prompt, but we'll cover a variety of things. So at this moment, I'm going to pass over to Craig to talk about his experiences with the meets listed there.
Thanks, Tom, and good evening, everybody. And if I could just echo some of the comments that Tom has made in his introduction, I think it is quite incredible that 163 people online at the moment, and it's a beautiful summer's evening. So people are drawn to swimming officiating as opposed to being out in their gardens or enjoying a glass of wine. And I think that says an awful lot about us as swimming officials, the commitment, the dedication. And I think experience tells me at the moment, talking to various officials in various places, that everybody wants to be back on poolside, but there is really that level of nervousness. And there is a degree of flexibility required, both in the physical, but also in our mental approach to it. I think everybody turned up to the selection meet in London. Quite unusually, we asked just for people who were prepared to officiate for the duration of the meet, so nobody just dipping in and out. And we entered this bubble, lots of testing, and for the first time ever, I think we held the pre-meet briefing online. And that allowed people to share their experiences, share their nervousness. But it was also about creating, I think, an environment as the 2 referees, Tom and I, for all of the other officials, to say to them, it was okay to be nervous, and let's talk about those nerves and see how we feel as we're going along. And we did sort of check-ins on a regular basis. And some of the, quite a lot of the things that I felt that I learned in our meet in London enabled me to be much more creative and positive around how we behaved at the European Championships last week in Budapest. That was a bubble of 4,500 people, which seems to be a bit of a contradiction in terms across artistic swimming, diving, and pool swimming, as well as some open water. And in that sort of 2.5 weeks, we had 4 positive tests. So I think you can be reasonably assured that returning to swimming officiating is safe. Chlorine is well known to kill the virus. And actually the protocols that we've got in this country, I would say, in general, are far more robust than what I experienced in Budapest, and also what was being talked about by colleagues all around Europe. And even, if I dare say, if you watch the US trials, which are about to start now for their Olympic selection, you will not see the levels of cleaning, for example, that we have in this country. It's got to be a really positive experience for you. And one thing I would really, really urge is don't be bullied into doing things that you don't feel comfortable with. Dave, Tom and I had a call last night just to plan this. And we were talking about the wearing of face masks and local protocols, which Tom has indicated. There's nothing to say that you won't be able to continue to wear face masks, even if that's no longer the norm in sort of British society. So if that's what you want to do, carry on doing it. We are always going to be desperate for swimming officials. I've been officiating for 40 years, and in all that time, I don't think we've ever had very many meets where we've had surpluses and we can turn people away. So if you're prepared to be, to commit to doing an event, fantastic. You should be welcomed with open arms. And if you want to wear a face mask, that doesn't really matter, does it? It's got to be a positive experience, and everybody has got to make sure that they're checking in with one another. We introduced a buddy system last week in Budapest, because we didn't want people constantly ticking lists to say that they were there, trying to make things simple. When everybody got onto the bus, they had to check that their buddy was actually on the bus and wasn't going to be left behind at the hotel. Because if you were left behind, that was going to be it. We didn't have a lot of capacity, so we just needed to ensure that everybody who was there was fit and well. And actually, from time to time, both in London and in Budapest, officials will come up and say, you know what, I'm having a bit of a wobble today. And we talk about what that was. Sometimes it was just about having to wear a face mask for hours on end. And as Tom mentioned about social media, that can be really positive, but it can also be quite a challenge for people. And I know, reading some comments from the Para meet in Sheffield, people found it very hard being in the hotel bedrooms for long hours of the day when they would normally be out doing other things or swimming officiating. So as Tom says, it's going to be a very different experience, but I think there's a real opportunity for it to be a positive experience. And we're going to come on, I think, shortly to talk about actually some questions around how are we going to swimming be, officials, and how do we adapt to the environment. But I think what I would say to you is I want to leave you with one really, really positive message, which is if you are nervous, that's absolutely fine. Talk to somebody about those nerves. But once you get back onto the poolside, you will be amazed how quickly you feel as if you've never been away. Dave, why don't you tell us some of your recent experiences?
Yes, thank you very much, Craig, and I echo a lot what you say. I mean, it was I've been to Sheffield, which is a week earlier than the London meet, and it was something I'd have never experienced before, a meet like that, where I become quite nervous before I started. And my first session of officiating was actually refereeing at the competition. And as you're right, as long as you're not overconfident, you soon drop back into the old ways of working. And I mean, one of my first things that sort of broke the ice was I took my mask off to blow the whistle, series of whistles, and my hearing aiding is flying across the pool. Yeah, it's not something you think it's going to happen, but I'm just grateful it didn't go into the water. But that sort of broke the ice, and then I just went back into the normal mode of swimming. But we did experience people who were very nervous, and it's only to be expected. We all human, we all act in different ways. But I found in general, everyone was very positive in their experience and their attitude. And once we got underway and they saw that we had the regimes of cleaning the starting platforms and people only went on to poolside when it was necessary, the swimmers, it did relax a lot of people. And people were aware of the situation prior to arriving, that they would only be able to travel from the hotel to the pool and back after competition, because we had the elite competition requirements from the DCMS, which, as you're aware, required you to actually stay in the COVID bubble and not breach that bubble. So you could be walking past people going shopping at the time or going to the shops, but you had to go back to your hotel room, and actually we had to eat in the hotel itself. In Sheffield, there was a couple of outbreaks of COVID, but they were people who were picked up prior to arriving in the country with the pre-departure tests. So that was a very, one way, reassuring to know that they were picked up well in advance. And there was a situation where a foreign team had to isolate because people on their plane later on had COVID, but there was no reports at all from anyone in the competition at Sheffield of any issues at all on that. So that was very reassuring for everyone. It was slightly different. We were sort of a pedestrian way of working between races because we had to spray the platforms. But then the swimmers themselves, as people forget, if we're nervous, they're nervous, everyone was nervous, and the swimmers hadn't probably dived for a long time. So it was them also getting back into the way of preparing themselves. It took a little bit longer to prepare themselves and get onto the platforms, but it was, as the week went on, it was going back to normal on that. So that was quite a positive experience, and it was a good thing to be at. We had to have less officials because of the COVID situation of reducing the amount of people in contact. We didn't have a time, 15-minute times for reporting into the call room because that could cause issues with COVID. So we had a reporting regime where they reported 4 races beforehand. So that was something we actually took on into Madeira in May. But that was a 7-day competition, a European competition. But because it's leading up to the Paralympics, it became an open competition. And what we had was 370 athletes from 47 countries in Madeira. And as you can imagine, everyone was channeling through Lisbon airport to come to there. So there was lots of people on similar planes from different countries. We also had nations from South America. These were mainly coming because of classification, but it was a concern for myself and the organisers because there was high COVID numbers in that area, in Brazil, Argentina and Cuba and Venezuela and Chile. But with all the pre-arrival testing and testing when they arrived, regular testing, it wasn't really an issue. So it was very reassuring. And we had to do things differently. We had to do technical meetings online and also technical briefings outside, which was lovely because it was in the sun looking across towards the sea. So that was probably the nicest place you could deliver, and probably won't have that opportunity again. But it gave you opportunities to think outside the box, and I think that's what people just need to think about sometimes. Don't always do something the way we've always done it. You can do things slightly differently, and makes it easier, and also relaxes people. We had to wear masks, but we didn't have any issues, and actually it soon became the norm, and you didn't even really think about it. It was only when you saw someone perhaps not wearing a mask correctly, you actually noticed there was an issue. Swimmers reacted very quickly to it, and coaches. I don't know if that's what you found when you in London or in Budapest.
I must confess that actually there was nothing nicer than getting back to my hotel room and being able to take my mask off and open the window and breathe fresh air. But I think, you know, they're very different kinds of experiences to what people are going to have in the UK, because they're going to be smaller meets and much shorter sessions. And actually just wearing a mask for 3 or 4 hours at a time is no big deal, is it?
No. And you did become, actually, you got used to wearing it, and actually it just made you feel safe as well when you had the mask on, because everyone was wearing it. It wasn't any different to anyone else, and it just became the norm. But as you say, it was nice to get to the hotel room, but unfortunately for me, it was dark when I went to the pool and dark when I left. But I think the main thing I would say to people is, if you're feeling a little bit anxious, that's fine, it's expected. And if you don't feel it's quite right for you at the moment to do, then that's fine. But when it is right for you, then come forward, you know.
I was very lucky as well. At the on Sunday, I attended Basildon's Level X. I arrived all dressed up to the nines in my whites, and I was told that I looked at the duty sheet, and I'd been allocated a duty, and the duty was bucket. I was given the role of bucket, and I went along and happily sloshed the blocks every now and again to ensure that we were compliant with the Swim England rules. So my huge thanks to the person who gave me that role a couple of days ago. And in terms of where the conversation is heading, in terms of distilling those experiences into generic practice that you can use at meets, just a couple of things I've noticed. So a few strands to draw from what my colleagues have said. So again, try and avoid displaying duties on a wall. That promotes crowding. It's just common sense not to do it. We ran a small Swim England time trial in Corby on Saturday, whereby athletes that have been rejected from the Glasgow meet, the British swimming meet that's being held in a couple of days' time, were able to post their times there instead. And again, we sent the duty list out in advance. Now, at a local level, that's maybe a little bit more difficult, and you might want to then get around that by having outdoor briefings. That's the case. At every meet I've been to, there's been a different approach to the use of backstroke ledges. Currently, they're not scheduled for use at Level X, just because we wrote those conditions in different times when things were far worse. But there's all sorts of conditions around spraying the stuff, because that's the point where you get a contact and a touch from a swimmer and a contact and a touch from the official, and probably the only time where there's the potential for some cross contamination by that way. Well, first of all, even though that is the case, the risk is very, very low due to it being humid and wet on the poolside, and ostensibly quite splashed in chlorine every time the swimmer starts. But it is advisable to, if you're using them, to wash them down. They don't need to be banned. They can be sprayed over time, and it may well be that need stops over time when we get past the 21st of June. So it might not necessarily be forever. But I wouldn't read into, because the Level X conditions say that backstroke ledges can't be used, that remains the arrangement so far for all other swimming. Yeah, I don't know if any colleagues have anything to add to that in terms of the ledge phenomenon.
We actually use them. We are both in both London and Budapest. In London, we had somebody who was going around and spraying them after each touch. Whereas in Budapest, we actually had the inspectors of turns on the end of the lane being responsible for spraying it. And I was so impressed by their diligence, because it was about protecting themselves as much as anything. And bearing in mind that you've got sort of judges from 30 odd countries, so sometimes communication can be a bit of an issue. But actually, I thought that was one area that I did have some level of concern, but they were just excellent. I couldn't fault anybody for not actually cleaning the ledge on an event by event basis. Of course, that's one area that there's always a lot of nervousness about the use of ledges. You know, if you're at a level, once we bring ledges back into maybe level X, who knows, or your club championships or whatever, you know, from time to time, people do make mistakes with those ledges, but they make mistakes with ledges at the European Championships and the Olympic Games. So just don't, you know, it's just one of those things. And if it all gets tangled up, just let somebody else just, you know, sometimes untangle it and deal with it for you, because sometimes it just becomes too much of a pressure and you end up beating yourself up about it. But I can assure you that at every single level of meet that I go to, at some point, somebody gets it tangled up. So really, you know, don't end up in tears. We had a judge in Budapest, first time ever, ended up in tears. So I spent 10 minutes talking to her to reassure her that it was not an issue. You know, I'm on television, it doesn't matter, you know, it really doesn't. Better that you learn and, you know, it doesn't happen again. So I think it does come back to, Tom, something that you did say earlier on, and I really think this is important. It's about, let's not start imposing things that aren't in the rules or local protocols or whatever people want to call them. The whole experience should be about having fun. And, you know, who knows who the judges are? We're all, whether you're a bucket or you're the referee or whatever you are, we are part of a team, and no one person, the referee has to be in charge. But that doesn't mean you go throwing your weight around. I was at a meeting about 18 months ago, probably just before we went into COVID. And two people that I spoke to, I said to them, they were just inspectors of turns or timekeepers or whatever they were. I was an international referee invited to this meeting. And I said to them, so what do you do for your job? Oh, I'm a judge at the International Court of Human Rights. And another one was one of the world's leading orthopedic surgeons. And they were happy being on the end of a lane as an inspector of turns because that's what they enjoy doing. So, you know, we're all part of a team and we're just swimming officials at the end of the day. It just so happens that one person's got to do the bucket. Tom and I will always think of you as that person now. You know, and other people somebody has to be the referee, but it doesn't always have to be the same person. So.
I think we've all been there with backstroke ledge where it goes wrong sometimes. And sometimes, you know, it may not be your fault. It's just, whereas you unroll it, it's all tangled. And I think, as you say, it's important not to get too het up about it because it just makes it worse. And there's always someone there to help and or just put a new one in. I had a situation in Madeira where we didn't go around spraying the platforms. What they did, they had 40 plus young volunteers who were basket carriers as well. There were 10 would come in and do the baskets, and then there was 5 coming in, spraying and cleaning the chairs and the platforms. And a day or so into it, they got to know me quite well, and they were asking not to let their parents know that they were cleaning because they don't do housework at home. Unfortunately, it was live on telly and they could see it at home. So when I pointed that out to them, they were sort of a bit of a gulp. But again, as you say, we're all qualified to different positions, but it doesn't stop us doing any role we're qualified to do. And that's what we've always done in the East region, where whether you're a referee, you may find yourself in the regional gala as timekeeper in the next session, because every job is important.
Yeah, and I believe it's bouquet, isn't it? Not bucket.
Yeah,
so we need to be careful, don't we? So other things, again, distilling practice with those sorts of things is, you know, 3 things. It might sound very, very simple to have, is number one, if you can bring your own hand sanitizer, that can allay a lot of concerns that you might have about being on deck and touching things that you don't want to touch for risk of infection. Similarly, it might sound really simple, the number of officials that turned up at a meet, the one, without a pen, probably best you bring your own equipment and make sure you've got your own basic equipment. And the other thing, which may sound slightly controversial to what we used to, is there may well be a time where you need to bring your own food as well to a meet. It's likely that that would be the last thing to return to competition, is all the residual catering, largely due to cost, but also due to the fact that they're simply not being offered in the same way that it has before. So you may well find when you return to the sport that you need to take charge of that yourself as well. Other things that I've heard mentioned, judges. So when you're judging on the side of a pool, and perhaps you've got 2-stroke judges in a 50-meter pool, or even in a 25, that's a bit of an extravagance, but if you do, then the things to bear in mind is nominate one person to stand on the 15-meter mark, and then nominate the other person to be distanced from that person. Now, of course, we do that anyway on breaststroke, but a very useful thing to do there would perhaps be to apply that across the board for all races. Have one nominated person on one side of the pool at the 15-meter mark, one person on the other side of the pool at the 15-meter mark. And if you have additional judges, then move them. And it's saying in your briefings that it's 5 meters, and that keeps people apart. Again, it's all very simple things, but things like the table at an event. So say if you have DQ forms, any other paperwork that you need, lap counters, things like that, have a separate table away from where the referee is stood, or where anyone involved in admin is, and just get people to write their DQs in that space, and that it's then going to be distanced from everybody else. You don't need to give out forms. The forms just need to be on the desk. If you're timekeeping and your watch doesn't start, and that's normal for all of us, isn't it? You might well find that the chief timekeeper will come in, and the slight adaptation to practice is that the timekeeper needs to stand back, and the chief timekeeper needs to continue timing the lane on the watch that they have started. Don't give the watch to the official to do that, because then you're handing over equipment. But I think your natural instinct will be to do that, and not do that rather. Ditto backup button. See if you can, if it's possible to socially distance, have the official that's normally on the lane press the backup button as normal in the event where a watch time is needed from a chief timekeeper. So again, there's no cross-contamination there. Do you really need radios? They're useful to have, but I can share with you that we probably swam without them for a long period of time. And if we're talking about something that's put directly into someone's ear, and then is handled, and then perhaps gets put back into a pot and is mistakenly not sanitized, then there's a real risk to that. So consider whether you actually need them for this moment in time. Is it really necessary? Marshalling, why not take it place outside in the summer months? Have it outside, or have it somewhere, maybe in a large fire exit with the windows and the doors open, because you've got to consider who is in that marshalling area. It's not just the swimmers, it's the people in there that are spending a few hours marshalling amongst swimmers as well. So consider where they might go, because in essence, the events we've been at, very privileged to actually have quite few swimmers there. It's going to be slightly bigger at an age group meet.
Tom, can I just come in on that? Because I think that's a really important point, but and Dave touched on it as well. Marshalling, call rooms are going to be a real pinch point. And I think one of the key messages that we should really try and get across, if you are operating any kind of call room, because of the nature of how they have operated in the past and how they're currently operating, as the call room supervisors or the referee, there really needs to be a great deal of flexibility and understanding that swimmers will try and arrive on time, but if swimmers are late, it shouldn't be used as a mechanism for stopping people from competing. And there needs to be a degree of understanding about that. And whatever level you're officiating at, that can be a bit of a challenge. And I would really, really urge everybody to have greater understanding around the operation of the call room. And if you've not worked in one, it's a great experience, it's a great opportunity. And once you have, you understand what the pressure is like and the need to have greater understanding so that the swimmers can safely be checked before they race. And we were doing in London, weren't we, Tom? One race at a time, basically. But there was never a point at which we were not going to allow a swimmer to swim if they turned up late, because that, that's not the purpose of the exercise.
Absolutely, and it again comes down to the principles of common sense, doesn't it? And if we, move along to, it's very common at meets, we know, to have a chair for officials and then a chair for the athlete next to them. So again, split them, have the officials on a chair against the wall by the pool, have the swimmer's chair a metre or two in front of them, if at all. It's probably the case that you would actually do away with that chair completely, but create a division between where the official normally sits and where the swimmer might stand or sit. It's probably for the best, actually, that there isn't a chair at present. Ditto, probably for the best, there's not a kit bag or a kit box for swimmers to put their stuff in and to remove. They would have to be sanitized every time. So again, you may have seen swimmers carrying these plastic bags around with them at British meets. It's quite a good and effective system for containing all of their equipment. So again, avoid doing that. The other thing that's been raised to me is, well, we're going to need to clear the pool after every event. And we have to bear in mind that when these events that we're talking about they happened in April and were planned in January, February, when COVID was at its absolute worst. I don't think we're too far away from being able to have over-the-top starts again. The reason being is that actually you could insist that swimmers could move a metre or two and hold the lane rope a metre or two away from the wall if you were that worried. I don't think it would make that much difference if you were actually by the wall and looking away. There's all that chlorine in the way. So please don't think that you're going to have very, very low levels of swimmers at meets, because if you manage the area in the pool and around the pool very well, you could really, it probably makes more sense that all that dead time when the swimmer is swimming out the other way to clear the pool is a way of saving time, but also a safer way of actually clearing the pool. So there's things like that. Do consider it. It's possible. Just because you haven't seen it at meets, one of the luxuries of British Swimming Selection Trials, there wasn't really many swimmers there, so we did have the luxury of time. But as we say, age group swimming might well be slightly different.
And yeah, Tom, can I just come in there? Because actually for the European Championships, one of our concerns was in the relays, we had very high levels of entries for the relays because it's one of the last selection points for the Olympic Games for the remaining slots. And we were planning to have lots and lots of heats of 10 teams, so 40 swimmers on the end of a pool. And we did actually try 2 or 3 different methods of containing the athletes, not allowing them to return back behind the blocks. The COVID protocol for European swimming was run by an eminent professor in Hungary, who was a real specialist in this. And he watched as we progressed the first couple of days, and he said, the reality is these swimmers have just come out of the water, they're covered in chlorine, and as far as he was concerned, the safest place for them to be was behind the blocks. And provided they stayed sufficiently far away from the inspector of turns, who was up on the starting bridge and away from them, there was very, very little risk involved. And actually, the swimmers again were very respectful. And if you ask them to keep back away from the inspector of turns, there, we had absolutely no problem. So I think you're absolutely right. Numbers of swimmers in meets and lane capacities are going to increase relatively rapidly, I'm sure.
The other thing allied to that is league competition. And I think if anything that has come back to me about league competition is that is the one nut that we have left to crack in terms of how we successfully return what are very, very valuable swimming experiences predominantly at the novice end of the sport, although we do have the National Arena League that takes place. The sudden mass coming together of hundreds of people for a 2-hour meet, I think we're still quite away from achieving. We are debating that tomorrow or on Thursday as part of the swimming leadership group as to how we can do that. There's been a fantastic National Junior League activity taking place that has enabled 116 teams to return to virtual league competition. But I would say that of all the elements of the sport that is really tough to return, it's going to be them. And it may well be that leagues need to operate in a reduced format, a virtual format for some time. However, that virtual format can be quite successful. If you think as
all I was going to say is I think perhaps also we can learn from some of the other disciplines. FINA this last weekend have had virtual diving and artistic swimming competitions taking place in multiple jurisdictions around the world using technology. So it's about people, if we want to do it, it's about finding that creative solution. I'm sure it can be achieved.
And again, if you think about leagues, they also open up. My recollection is many years spent as a chief timekeeper walking along and collecting the times at a manual league gala from individual timekeepers. And again, that's a practice that we really can't do at present, because you have to, I personally, I'm deaf as a post, I have to go and speak to the person, almost invade their personal space to get the time. And so that's not really going to work at that moment in time. So again, real question mark at the minute over leagues, which is very sad because they play a role in our sport that, you know, most swimmers enjoy. So yeah, in terms of other things, you will see that at the bottom of this PowerPoint, there are some notes about mentoring at events. We can't afford to stop the training of officials and the development of officials. And we can't afford that to happen. There is very clear guidance now that, in a nutshell, the requirement that you stand next to an official at the end of a lane to be mentored and in effect your supernumerary to proceedings when you're being trained has to go. And we have to replace it with that dovetailing element of having a qualified official on lane 1 who mentors an official on lane 2. And that's more effectively at the turn end achieved, but can be done at the start end. That is the way that we're going to have to adapt the sport to enable them to do things. Ditto, have a qualified J2 on the 15-meter mark, have an official at 5 meters, and do the mentoring at a distance. It's the way it's going to have to happen, and that may well be more possible due to the likelihood that events will be held with swimmers not on deck in most cases, and there will be other places where they're housed. So you will have more deck space to do that. So those years of walking down the pool, you might get a brief reprieve from that of asking people to move out of the way, have maybe dissipated for a little while. So there's something to continue and think about there. Okay, are we ready to move on?
On that, Tom, also you were saying we've spoke before about only one starter, not sharing microphones and things like this.
And you know, there's that umbrella now, isn't there, of the common sense approach in each of these cases. If it feels wrong, it probably is wrong. If it feels not imprudent, then it's probably not very prudent to do. So consider it that way.
Yeah, no, I experienced when I was in Madeira that doing things differently it gives you an opportunity to do things electronically, where in the past there's always been handing bits of paper and posting results and groups of people standing around. And we just took it as an opportunity to do things electronically. We had a little bit of pushback to start with from coaches, but they soon realised it was ideal for them, and they didn't all have to group around in various places, and it worked well. It just had the opportunity to prove it, and we took advantage of that. I think it's just, we often see it at the readings or at galas where they post all the results for the parents all on one wall, and then you get a mass of parents, you know, congregating. And obviously it's an ideal opportunity just to post it all online for people in a nice, easy place to get the results. That's in the luxury when we obviously have crowds back in the pool.
And you know, it's worth saying at this point that your duties as an official remain your duties as an official, and you don't need to you know, become a pseudo COVID liaison officer for the meet. That role and those appointments sit with the technology, and that's the thing. I can see some questions coming up into the chat. We will have some questions and answers at the end, but yeah, it's noted, Dawn, I believe, so we will touch upon that when we get to the end of the presentation. And again, there's some of the things that we've said. Now, the other thing that we've mentioned in terms of that is the standard of swimming that we've encountered. And very often at a domestic level, you might well find that the seeding of athletes is very, very different. So the level X at Basildon, we had a swimmer that went in on an entry time of 1 minute 5 for 100 freestyle. They've done 7 weeks of training, but over lockdown, they've grown several meters and their PV was improved to 58.2. Okay, so they just have these races that are, you know, out of seeding completely because of the way that swimmers have developed. That's something to consider. Ditto, the transfer from swimming in a short course pool to a long course pool proved to be an enormous challenge for some athletes, both at the British Championships and before, and at the time trial. And you had some people put on 7 or 8 seconds onto a time. Okay, Dave, if we can move on. So if I may, I'm going to talk about now, when will your return to Pool B? You may have done a level X meet. You may shortly be asked by your club to go to a level X meet. But one opportunity that is in the diary is the end of this season and the British Swimming Summer Racing Festival. So I sit on the British Swimming Pathway Implementation Group, PIG as it's known, for England. And they took a decision a few months ago to cancel the British Summer Championships and the Swim England Summer Meet. Only the second time that's happened, really, since the war, and the other time was last year. So there's lots to consider. That's existed in various guises all of those years. It's been replaced by a British Swimming Summer Racing Festival. That's really important. Basically, there will be a British Championships, a British Summer Championships held, but in regions. And that will be the regions of England, the districts of Scotland, which is essentially the regions of Scotland, and the regions of Wales. 14 meets, and obviously the East region plays a part. Now, one of the questions I'm asked is, well, why aren't clubs running those meets? Well, the reality is that with all of the extra space that you need, with the restrictions on the number of athletes that can enter, these are costly affairs, particularly given that there probably won't be any spectators in the room either. So the region sees itself as having a moral duty to fund and foster those opportunities for swimmers in this season. And I'll touch upon that a little bit more later. If we can move on to the next slide, please, Dave. So picture this, you know, that championships, I was there, 2019, Norwich, junior age group competition. If the swimmer was 12 in the regional long course championships in 2019, which is the last time they were held, if they return at 15 in 2022, that is almost all of their age group swimming career done. There's not much more after that. There's maybe a little bit of specialising as a senior swimmer. More concerningly, if they were 14 in 2019, the impact of the pandemic is that they moved from what we might have called the BAGCAT age groups, younger age group gala, straight into the senior age group category. And that creates a huge issue, both in terms of swimmer development, swimmer engagement, but you know, if anything starkly highlighted the issue of the pandemic, it's that. Where is our next European junior team going to come from if that is the way that we treat our swimmers? So we've got a duty as a region as well to ignore the cost to a degree and actually think about how we engage this lost generation that we might have. Thanks, Dave. So, yeah, I think we've gone backwards there. Okay. That's it. Okay, so we have the situation here where we have these are the events that British Swimming proposed. And if you could click on again, Dave, there's a few more things to come up. Okay, so it was all of those information. I'm going to read it. Those were the events that British Swimming proposed. We think that would be very difficult for us to run in terms of cost. Most of the events being 200 meters or higher. You know, long course, the para swimmers, everybody in the same place would result in very, very few swimmers being able to attend, and actually perhaps it not meeting its objective. We have a concern as well about the age group, the lowest age group being 13. That doesn't really say much about 12s, 11s, 10s, and we must accept that British swimming, their involvement in an athlete's career starts at around 14, 15, not at 10. So I can understand why they would set this, but they're some of the feedback items we had. Next slide, please, Dave. So again, what we've done, and again, if you could click a little bit more, because there's a few things to come up on that slide. Our events, I can't quite confirm the dates just yet because they're due to be published. They're due to be published, but we have added in East Region a 12-year age group to the programme. We have ditto arranged to include all 50-metre events into the programme. So our region festival will have all of those age groups listed there. You can see that a 17-year-old age group has been added to protect those swimmers that might have inadvertently slipped into the older age group category. And that's what we will be doing. Weekend 1 will be at UEA Sports Park in Norwich. Again, these dates are going to be confirmed in the next few days. And we have the pool. And just to articulate how we've mirrored practice from other galas, we've also booked all 12 courts of the sports hall as well to have an athlete lounge where athletes will be housed there instead of around the pool deck. Okay, we'll have all the 400s there. And some of the 200-metre events, and we've organised the programme so that the age groups are only in attendance for half a day each, enabling them to travel home in the evening or travel there in the morning, and to cut down the need for hotels. On weekend 2, we've been able, and we're quite excited to be able to announce this, that we're going to be holding the event at the London Aquatic Centre. Various reasons for that, largely from the opportunity to have a huge pool hall and to make it safer. But also, what a way of engaging athletes back into the sport, taking them to one of the most futuristic swimming pools still in the world with the highest level of technology, and giving them the opportunity to go off the blocks there. And in those meets, we'll be having the 50s, 100 and 200-metre events. And if you'll be aware that Norwich Pool is currently drained, if there are issues with the Norwich Pool, we've also negotiated another day there to move the events. And so we'd have a longer meet at the London Aquatic Centre. Okay, so if we can move on. So yeah, you've got the competition pool there. This is Norwich. And then the athletes, instead of being dotted around that space there, we've got this entire space, which is the 12 courts of the athletics track. So the space over which the athletes will be distributed is massive. Costs a lot, but actually that's our role as a region to do that and return that opportunity so they don't miss a part of this season. Next one, please, Dave. Now, of course, the London Aquatic Centre, look at the size there. There's been found out now that there's 2,182 seats in the London Aquatic Centre for spectators. None of them will be used for spectators. They'll be used for athletes only. There will be no spectators at the meet, and it's great now because that pitch has been updated with tinted windows now, so no one can actually see in. It's the perfect venue to host a spectatorless meet because you can't get people at the window. In view of that, we're going to live stream all the events. There will be limited refreshments, online programme. The non-technical personnel, and indeed the technical personnel, will be slightly reduced, and we will have the right coverage of the pool. And we will also look, if we can, to adhere to mentoring guidelines and requirements. Okay, so that's the ethos and rationale of these events that are coming up. You can see now that it's going to be a challenge for a club to put that on due to the additional costs and lack of income that is generated by those events. So if we move on to the next slide. Yeah, we'd also have an additional event talking about that lost generation. It's the only event of its kind in the 14 regions. I can give you the date because it's not part of the programme for the East Region for this British Swimming Summer Festival. But Basildon Sporting Village, currently a minor issue with the boom, so we can't have 50-metre events there. But we're going to have a young future champions meet. It's really important that we identify the talent and the participation rate of the age group that has not really swum at all as a result of the pandemic. So short 50s and 100s, age groups only 10 and 11, maybe aiming for 120 athletes in each event. But when you do that with a single age group, it creates quite a nice meet. We're going to have some Olympian talks before and after the meet to really, get that sense of this is our next generation of swimmers coming through. And it should be a really, really good, fun meet. But again, with all of the athletes covered and, the athlete compound taking place completely outside again. So if we move on to the next slide. So there's Basildon. It's in 25-metre mode. It will be for that event. And that's, you know, we'll have the officials more socially distanced than are on there. But that's one of the things that was at previous times. There'll be no swimmers around the edge. And then this is where they're going to be housed. So if we move on to the next slide, we've got a 700-seater grandstand around there. There will be marshalling tents. Clubs can bring their own gazebos to house their swimmers if they like, because we've got the whole of the athletics track as well, and all of the banking seating, and we can really spread the athletes out, give them a really fun time. But again, you'll appreciate that that comes at a cost, and that's why we're doing it. If we can move on. So yeah, that brings it. The thing that, the reason for saying that is that you are welcome, and most welcome, and always have been welcome, to make your first foray back into officiating by coming to one of those meets. There will be a sign-up form very shortly that will invite peer officials to attend those meets, be it for one session, be it for all sessions, be it for whatever you want to do. But it would be a way of seeing and modelling the practice that we've seen by watching other people do it to a wider group of people, so that when the new season starts, you're then able to take that experience back into your own club, back into your own open meet, and then see that distillation of information, the theory tonight and the practice at the meet. So we'd welcome the applications and from all of you to do that, and hopefully we can give the swimmers a really fun time to think about it. Now, Dave, did you want to talk about some of these updates?
Yes, just before we move on, it's the opportunities to officiate at the galas will be advertised on the website and by email, and also it will be an electronic form completion, very similar to the form people completed to come onto the forum tonight. So it makes it nice and simple for people to do. It makes it an easy way for them to fill in using any device at any time of the day, and obviously us capturing the information in a timely manner. So what I propose to do is now we just move on. We've had quite a few questions tonight and some previously, and some of the slides we move on to now will actually cover some of the information, and quite a bit of the information I'm going to give you has only come out in the last week or so. So it's quite fortuitous that we've got this updates going on now. You mentioned earlier about the returning to competition guidance. That document's been in wide circulation since last year, and it was updated in April of this year. And as was previously mentioned, it was current at the time, but it gives good information as to what's going on. This document is available online, and I can circulate it following the meeting. We, in part of the actual enrolment onto this course, one of the questions I asked was, or we posed to people, is how do you feel about returning to officiating? And this now gives you the information, how people feel. We got 50 people said they felt very confident, 94 confident, and then it goes all the way down. And you can see there the amount, apologies for that, every time I move my mouse it changes. We've got 156 people online at the moment, and we had 264 responses to the actual enrolling on the forum. So you can see we have quite a wide range of information there, but in general most people feel various forms of being confident, and hopefully tonight we will allay people's fears regarding the information, because sometimes people are anxious or worried because it's the unknown, and hopefully this information we've given them will help them to prepare for the future. So the return to swimming competition form we mentioned, no major competition since March 2020. It covers the return to pool guidance, covering training issued. And it mentions the Series 2 Level X racing, which has been updated since April. And the return to competition, which starts at stage 4, and level 4 licensing meets from May the 17th. And then it mentions also license meets from the 21st of June. Now, one of the things that we've been asked is that we're very much aware that a lot of people's British swimming officials licenses have expired or are about to expire. This is the latest information that's come out on the 25th of May. So what they're doing is that everyone's license which has expired or is about to expire will be extended by a further 12 months in the main. So if your license has expired in 2020 and hadn't been renewed before the end of December 21, then obviously the license will continue. Licenses are due to expire at the end of 2021 and were not renewed before the end of April this year, will be extended by a further 12 months. What you won't do is get an extra license card with a new information on it. It will automatically be extended, and I understand that the electronic records will be updated in due course. So the new license cards won't be renewed, but once you do actually go to renew your license, when they do expire, then you will get the new license and the appropriate documents that go into your membership book. The position has always been from the Swim England officials group that no one should be disadvantaged for any time they've missed or expired documents during the pandemic period. This is a new document that's come out. It's the Open Mate licensing criteria. It's a temporary document until the 31st of December this year. And what it does, in agreement with the swimming committee, the swimming officials group has recommended and it's been approved by the National Committee, the actual licensing levels, and also it says who can act as a referee, who can act as a starter, chief timekeeper, and different roles at different levels of meets. This form has been circulated. If you haven't seen it, I will be circulating it later in the week. It requires, you can see highlighted in yellow, it's probably a bit small on your screen, especially if you're on a telephone. But if you look at a level 3 meet, it says about the referee that you have to be licensed and qualified as a referee. But it mentions things like the second referee can be qualified to at least a J2S and may be appointed if necessary for the smooth running of the event. It mentions that the starter has to be at least qualified to J2 and a J2S in training. So what's happened, some of the restrictions in the past have been lowered just to the end of the year to allow us to resume competition. And it also takes into account that we may be losing some officials, or some officials may not feel comfortable coming back at this time, but it also allows people in training to get experience on poolside. And then it covers J1 in training, covers also level 1 and 2 meets, and it mentions what a referee in training is. If someone that has completed the referee course or the theory section of it, or been on part of the theory section, or you're a licensed and qualified J2S who has completed the beginner's guide to refereeing, which is the online iOS course, and can also evidence that you've acted in the role as a referee for at least one previous license level 4 meet. So that's some of the information, but I'll send that out, and that will be very helpful to people who are being mentored or are in training or actually run galas. The return to competition training of officials, this was issued by the Swimming Officials Group, and it mentions no mentoring or assessment should take place at level X meets, with the exception of timekeepers. And it mentions how that takes place. Mentoring license meets level 1 to 4. So in the current climate, there should be no expectation by the candidate that mentoring will be possible at the event. And I know we've had questions regarding this. It will be subject to the availability of a sufficient number of suitable qualified individuals. officials in training who have been mentored by a qualified official in an adjoining lane, which is what Tom mentioned earlier, that mentoring people in other lanes, joining lanes, or in a socially distanced manner as a J2, 2S or a referee, which Tom has highlighted. And it then goes on to talk about assessment processes and if poolside assessments are required or not. So this will be also circulated in due course. And that's the 3 pages of the document I'm referring to, just to make you aware of that. And these are just some slides really for courses or online, where you can go to the Institute of Swimming website, which is part of the Swim England website, and you can log on and complete the Judge Level 1 theory. There is a section there for Judge Level 1 theory if you're already qualified as a timekeeper, where you can, the 3rd one on the right-hand side, you can go into the course there. So you only use the timekeeper section as a refresher. And then it mentions, as you can see at the bottom left, the beginner's guide to refereeing, which is prerequisite if you wish to act as a J2S as a referee. And there's a contemporary issues section there, which I know a number of people have asked tonight and previously. If you click on there, it's free and it's an online CPD, and it takes about 45-50 minutes to complete. And once you've completed it successfully, you will be issued with a certificate and records will be updated. And that just goes through the different pages you expect to roll onto the courses. Right, that's just a quick run through of that. We asked people, recommended it as a refresher, that you could look at the FENA officiating in strokes. I think someone's got their microphone on somewhere. They're aware of that. If they could perhaps make sure their microphones are muted, please. Thank you. So was there any questions? Have you seen any questions, Tom or Craig, on that? Because I can't see it on my screen because I'm sharing.
Yeah, I can see a few. So, you know, I would say that those FENA videos are really good. They've been updated. Craig, I don't know if you're perhaps a better place to talk about than me, but
I think, I mean, they're basic, but actually, I think I would really encourage everybody, no matter how confident you are in your ability to return to swimming officiating, to just invest a bit of time going through them, because you'd be surprised what you think you remember and what you've forgotten. And actually they're very well put together. You know, they're really good little refreshers at the end of each section. And there's nothing like learning by watching and looking at the way the strokes are supposed to be swum, and different little tips. Just to remind you, you don't want to be tripping up, or you don't want to be suddenly having to refer to your rule book when you're on the pool deck. So I would really encourage everybody just to invest a bit of time in them. They're far from perfect, but they are really good aid memoirs.
I found they were very good, and I watched them all again, because, as you say, it's so easy to perhaps forget something, and it acts as a refresher. And it's surprising sometimes what you may miss, especially when you see the butterfly and the breaststroke comparisons.
I mean, just if people are somewhat cynical or not sure that it's worth investing the time, at the end of this month, we'll be hosting a seminar online for all of the judges who are appointed to go to the Olympics. And it's a similar format that we've used in many Olympic cycles in the past. And we actually spend a good couple of hours going through those and talking about nuances, talking about different people's perspectives on it, just to try and make sure that we standardize an approach. One of the problems that we encounter on a fairly regular basis is alternating feet on butterfly. you see the left foot is higher than the right foot, and the next time you see that it's reversed. If you don't see that swimmer reversing their legs, then you cannot disqualify. You only disqualify what you physically see, and you can't disqualify things that you don't see. So, you know, recently in Budapest, we could see various things on the big TV monitors that were suspended above the pool, but the officials couldn't be expected to disqualify for things they see on the monitor that they couldn't see in the water. So it's important, and I think that those videos, that's why you should all be looking at them. We should all be looking at them. And I've spent a few hours this year already, and I'll be spending a few more hours before we go to Tokyo.
And I think that, as you said, it's important that it's not just asking ourselves to do it. Even people going to very sort of senior events are also still looking at the videos, acting as a refresher. So I think that's a good message to pass out.
And what I would say, Dave, is that we in Budapest, we trialed some new underwater video technology. And we overturned 2 or 3 decisions that were going to be made on the pool deck. And for me, what's the most important thing about being a swimming official? It's about making sure that everybody has a fair opportunity, and also trying to ensure that nobody is disqualified when they shouldn't be disqualified. Those 2 things are really, really key for me. And that's why it's worth investing in time in those videos to make sure, again, that you don't make a mistake on the pool side by something that you think you remembered, but actually the rules have changed a bit.
I mean, someone just mentioned about VAR there. It's probably like football, but I think you're right. I mean, I've always, hopefully the right philosophy is that when I've been training people is we're human. We see A and we see C, and if we're not careful, the brain will tell us we've seen B when we haven't, and it's recognizing we've seen the beginning, as you said, about the legs. You've seen the first bit, you've seen the second bit, and you haven't seen all 3 ingredients, and you're just recognizing that as well.
Now, there are lots of comments on here about should we be introducing VAR technology, and actually the response we can give is that the swimming version of VAR is being developed at the highest level, just like it is in football. It's being developed at World Championship level, probably be used at the Olympic Games, no doubt at the US Olympic trials to next week. They will have it as well, because the idea kind of, I think, originated in the US. But we are, of course, a million miles away from having a level 3 open meet in the East region. And we will never probably get to that stage, just like VAR.
And Tom, may I say, nor do we want to.
No.
You know, we have had lots of very interesting philosophical debates, and it's absolutely appropriate that we start to develop it more, and it will be at the Olympics in Tokyo, first time ever. And we trialed it, as I say, in Budapest. But that's the level at which it should stay. There's a real danger that people want to introduce all sorts of cameras for all sorts of reasons. And it's not for now. It's not for now. The costs are prohibitive. You're talking between 50 and 100,000 US dollars or whatever. And we just can't afford that. We need to focus on basic swimming officiating first.
Am I right in saying, Craig, you're using it if there's a disqualification to review to see if the disqualification is correct? Is that what you're saying? You're not using it to officiate?
I'm going to plead the Fifth Amendment there. That's a controversial discussion that has yet to take place. But the reality is that some feel that we should be using it to disqualify, others believe we should only be using it to overturn. We haven't made a public statement on it, and I think it seems late to be going out to say we're going to use it to disqualify if people are not aware of that already, but we'll see. I mean, Dawn has raised this question about using virtual reality for training swimming officials. I'm not sure quite what you mean by virtual reality, but certainly using video and going back and reviewing competitions and that sort of thing, I think is a really good idea. And you can have some very interesting, creative discussions. And I think that's also how I would encourage swimming officials to get together and try and help each other, to talk about some of their experiences once we return to some more officiating. And I think that would be a really, really useful tool for people to share that.
Yeah. There's also comments about training and there being so few galas. That is something that British Swimming and Swim England are aware of. But do keep in mind that a lot has changed. There is an online J1 course now for people to do. There's an online timekeeper course. And the other thing that we've perhaps become too obsessed by is getting people to sign off all these competencies at the front of the book after many, many times of experiencing things. A pragmatic approach needs to be taken to the training of officials. And is it possible to cover two things in the same session? You know, freestyle and another element. Yeah, you don't have to do full hours and have things. I saw a situation once in a neighbouring county of ours, not in the region, where the person had to tick the duty 5 times before it was signed off. And there's, you know, it was taking people 50, 60 galas, sometimes 3 or 4 years to qualify as a J1. That's not the case now. So it's possible as a referee to maybe have 3 of trainee J1s, and then in the course of the meet, just get them to, or the session, after an hour, just get them to rotate to the next position and be mentored in a different capacity. And then after another hour, rotate into a different position and cover a range of things. I'm not saying it needs to be done in super quick speed, but you can get around doing a range of things at the same time.
Yeah, and also, Tom, there's in the documents I was showing a few minutes ago, previously had been a requirement you had to do so many sessions at different levels of galas. That restriction has been removed till the end of the year, so that will make it easier for people to get mentoring when the opportunity arises. They don't have to go to a level 1 meet and a level 3 meet to do the same information.
Yeah. Now, a few other questions about the 2 galas I mentioned. Yeah, I mean, they're embargoed at present. I can't tell you the actual dates just yet. There's going to be a big press release statement by British Swimming by the end of this week. So that will be confirmed, but that's why I wasn't able to cover them in that way, but they will be out very, very soon. Questions about qualifying times in the absence of current data. And that maybe strays a little bit from the officiating world and us doing that, but essentially a model of using legacy times for age groups. So using the data that's in there up until the 20th of March will be used. There is, I think, still an inherent unfairness in mandating the use of level X times. It should perhaps be possible to qualify for an event, but not the sole means of qualifying for an event via level X, because we are aware that a number of clubs aren't able to do that. And so therefore it becomes slightly discriminatory if you insist that a swimmer has to have a level X time to qualify for meets. And we've certainly worked on that process in setting the qualifying times for the summer meet. There are, again, some things that stray a little bit away from the situation. So we've got the 8 and the 1500 meter not being included. It's not quite the time for an athlete to swim that distance, having returned to training in April. And again, the legitimate question there is about open water. Now, open water is a wonderful thing if it's an individual pursuit. But if you put the swimmers in a huddle next to each other on a pontoon, then you create an issue in terms of social distancing. And that's been the real stopping point for open water swimming at this moment in time, in terms of mass open water swimming. You don't have to think about the swimmers being on the pontoon, in the bank, all over the place, and it creates a number of issues. British Triathlon have been very successful in running triathlons, but their triathlons have run by having individual start times for open water, and then that get for the start of the swim, so staggered starts individually, and that's made a difference. But there are plans to host a Swim England open water festival in sort of September, October time. So watch this space about open water. Yeah, the other things now. There we go. I can't see a huge amount there in terms of other questions. So hopefully,
J1 theory says, I'm worried about doing practical aspects. Should I redo the theory nearer the time when I'm going to do meets? Well, I understand if you've done the online J1, you can go back into it, log back in and review the videos, or there's the FINA officiating videos, which are available via a link on the regional officials web pages, which are probably show you more information and also give you a nice lead into officiating on poolside.
And somebody, I think Paula has suggested, could we publish the answers in a Q&A? So I think that would be quite a good idea. Perhaps we can moderate some answers and put those, Dave, in a resources section on the website, because I think people will find that quite useful.
Yeah, there's a few questions there about FINA rules updates. I'm aware a lot of people will need them to renew their license. We're probably almost done the term of the FINA rules update, but most people are aware of them. But I understand at the moment it's still a requirement to renew your license. I know the Swimming Officials Group in nationally have a view on that, but I will be talking in the next couple of weeks to our county representatives, where we can do this online and advertise it with a view to perhaps 1 or 2 counties doing that and sharing opportunities so people can do it online for approximately an hour.
Other than some facilities rules and one other, the Congress this coming weekend in Doha, the next technical rules update will be after the Congress in Fukuoka next year, so it should be fairly straightforward.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't see many other questions there that we perhaps haven't answered. So, yeah, that's from there.
Yeah, well, I think that's an hour and a half. I think that's a good time to finish.
Can't see any more questions coming in now. I can see them.
Yeah, there's now a mass exodus, Dave.
Yes,
Time to call it a night.
Anyway, all I would say, wrapping up now, is thank you everyone for taking the time to log on tonight and say thank you for doing that and taking the opportunity to update yourselves. I'd like to thank Tom and Craig for their input, and without you we wouldn't be able to put this forum on. And thank you, Jerry, for letting all the people in. It's been a bit of a administrative nightmare on that, but thank you very much, and I'll say good night to everyone. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody. It's good fun.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.